Today we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement where the subject is an expression of an amount. Typically, a subject will not be plural or singular because of the presence of phrases or clauses in the sentence. This rule is bent a little bit when we're talking about expression of an amount. When you have an expression of an amount, you have to read the sentence and look for clues that will tell you whether or not that expression of an amount is singular or plural. So let's take a look at the rule. So the rule is an expression of an amount, and what we're talking about here are measurements, a percentage, fractions, for example, may be singular or plural depending on how it is used. So it's all about how it is used. This means we're going to have to look for clues in the sentence, and we're going to have to analyze each sentence for meaning. So here's the example that shows how an expression of an amount can be singular or plural. $5 is the price of the lunch, of the buffet lunch. So here we're talking about the price, which is a singular quantity. And so in this case, we're not talking about 5 individual dollars. Here we're talking about one price. And that's why they use the singular verb is. And we know that is singular because it ends in S. It's a singular verbs end in S. So here in the present tense. And then here's another one. $5 were in the bag. So now we're talking about, since we're using the word were here, we're now talking about individual dollars in the bag. So that's why they use were. Here's another thing. Here's a fraction. About 2/3 of the audience has been seated. Whenever there's a fraction, like 2/3 or 1/4 or 7/8, usually there'll be a prepositional phrase right after it. And if the object of the preposition, that is the noun right after the preposition right here, the audience, if that thing is thought of as singular, if that is a singular or plural word, that'll tell you whether or not the fraction is. So here we have the audience, which is a collective of noun here, that is thought of as one unit. So that means we're going to use a verb that ends in S, so that's why we say has been seated, because audience is a singular noun. The next one, about 2/3 of the guests. See, now we're using a plural word, guests. In the prepositional phrase right here of the guests, in the prepositional phrase we have this plural word. So that plural word here tells us that the 2/3 here will be plural, and that's why we say have been seated. So when you read, usually prepositional phrases won't tell you whether or not a subject is singular or plural, but in this issue, when you're dealing with expressions of an amount or percentage, the prepositional phrases will be very good clues. 32 yards was the distance of the Rams' last touchdown pass. So we're talking about the distance, which is a singular thing. This predicate nominative is a singular quantity. So that means that we're going to use a singular verb. And in the past tense, the form of be does change depending on the singular or singularity or plurality of the subject. So that's why we say was. It ends in S. And then here's a different one. 32 yards were measured off in 1 yard sections. So they're talking about 1 yard sections, so we have 32 of these sections. So now we're talking about a plural quantity because we have a bunch of little sections. So that's why we use were instead of was. Okay, let's do some of the exercise. This, along with collective nouns, is probably the hardest thing to get around. What you really have to do is use your reading skills to find out whether or not the subject is thought of as individual units or as one unit. So number one, $25 is or are the cost. So this predicate nominative, the cost, which is a noun after a linking verb, is or are is a linking verb because I can replace it with an equal sign here. $25 equals the cost. Since that predicate nominative is singular, the subject over here is probably singular too, and it is. And so the singular verb ends in S, so we're going to pick the verb is. All right, number two. we have do or does 6 fluid ounces of water weigh the same as 6 fluid ounces of tomato. So this requires you to read the sentence for meaning. Our verb here is weigh. It's do or does weigh. And since we're talking about the weight, that's one thing, that's one quantity. So that means even though we have 6 fluid ounces, we're really talking about that expression of an amount as one weight. So that means it's singular. One weight is singular. So that means we want the verb that ends in S. So the helping verb over here is does, the one that ends in S. Number 3. Recently, about 5% have or has been the interest rate. So here we have our linking verb been. So when we have a linking verb like this, the predicate nominative will probably tell you whether or not it's going to be singular or plural. In this case, it does. Here's our interest rate. Interest rate is our predicate nominative. It's a noun after the linking verb. It's the same thing as the 5%. So this is a singular thing. If the predicate nominative is singular, the subject is probably singular too if it's an expression of an amount, and it is. So that means the helping verb that we use here to for this state of being verb here will be has been. Number 4. If 4 cents is or are my change, just keep it. So here we have another linking verb. It's a linking verb because I can put an equal sign above it. 4 cents equals my change. That means that we'll have a predicate nominative or a predicate adjective after it. And these, they're predicate nominatives. So here's the predicate nominative. It's the noun after the linking verb, my change. Now change is one thing. It's one quantity. So we're not talking about individual cents here. We're talking about one quantity. So we'll say if 4 cents is, because it's singular, because the predicate nominative is singular. And then number 5. 3/4 of a cup was or were all the sugar called for in that recipe. So here is our linking verb. Replace it with an equal sign. And in this expression of an amount, we have a predicate nominative. We have all the sugar called for in that recipe. In this case, they're talking about one amount of sugar, kind of like the one amount of weight that we had in number 2. So because we're talking about one amount of sugar, we're going to treat 3/4 of a cup as singular, and we're going to say was. So what I'd like you to do is go through the rest here, 6 through 10, and see what you can do, and then I'll read off the answers when you're done.